Hey, it's Danny from projectmanaverse.com, and in this video I'm going to answer the question, what is stakeholder management? So let's jump in. First of all, let me say that stakeholder management is a very important skill for any project manager. If you want to do a successful delivery and have a successful project, you're going to have to learn how to manage your stakeholders. So first of all, let's start with what is a stakeholder. A stakeholder is essentially anyone that has some kind of interest in your project. And they could have an interest in your project for pretty much one of three reasons. Number one, they have to do something on your project. So they have to deliver something on your project. Number two is that they are impacted by your project. So something your project is going to do is going to impact them in some way. Or number three, they might have to make a decision on your project. So there might be various key decision points throughout your project. And for whatever reason, they are part of that decision-making forum that needs to decide those things. So those are the common main reasons why someone might have a stake in your project. Now, what is stakeholder management? So I thought about this and I thought the best way to explain it is to break it down into 5 elements. So I'm going to talk about the 5 elements of stakeholder management. And if you understand these elements, then you should understand what stakeholder management actually is. So element number 1 is understanding who the stakeholders are. So identifying the stakeholders is part of stakeholder management. So you need to understand all those people that have that interest in your project, all the people that need to do something on your project, all the people that are going to be impacted by your project, and all those decision makers on your project. And you might find some more along the way that kind of fit outside of those categories, and that's fine. But that's the first thing you need to do, is identify all those key stakeholders. Element number 2 of stakeholder management is understanding those stakeholders. So that's part and parcel of stakeholder management, not just knowing who they are, but understanding them. And what do I mean by understanding them? I mean, understanding, like, why do they have a stake in the project, number 1? So do they have to do something, or are they impacted by it, or are they a decision maker? But also, what's in it for them? You know, what's their politics on the project? Why do they care about it? And do they think it's a good thing? Do they think it's a bad thing? Are they going to be a difficult stakeholder? So you almost have to put yourself in their shoes and think, right, if I was this person and this project was coming along, how would I feel about the project? You need to understand them and understand their interest in the project, and how, number 1, how interested they are. They might not really care, but they have to know about it. And also, what's their kind of politics? Is there something in it for them? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? So get to understand it as well. So that's element 2 of stakeholder management, is understanding the stakeholder. Element 3 of stakeholder management is forming a relationship with the stakeholder. So once you've identified them and you have some idea of how they feel about the project, now it's time to engage them. When I say engage them, just have a conversation with them, introduce yourself. And you don't have to do this with all your stakeholders, because you'll have a lot of stakeholders and some of them won't have a huge stake in your project. So you don't have to form a relationship with all of them. But those key ones that you identify as part of that whole stakeholder management identification process, you need to make sure you understand those key stakeholders and reach out to them and do that introduction and form a relationship with them. And you can do that many ways. So maybe just have a one-to-one with them, sit down with them, explain what your project is doing, ask them how they feel about it, ask them, is there any ways they want to have communication with you? Do you want to have one-to-one meetings, or just want to email updates? Or how do they want to get involved in the project? What is their level of involvement? How involved do they want to be? So just form that relationship and start to make a connection. That's the 3rd element of stakeholder management. Element 4 of stakeholder management is establishing boundaries, or maybe I should say enforcing boundaries. And you don't really do this by stating at the start of the project to those stakeholders what the boundaries are. It's more done organically, naturally throughout the course of the project. If you feel that they're overstepping the mark, these stakeholders, or they're going too far, or they're demanding too much, you should feel that as a project manager, and you should maintain those boundaries and have the courage and confidence to push back and say, no, you're going too far there, or being a bit firm with them sometimes. So that's part of it as well. And the typical things are things like, what did I jot down here? Yeah, so things like when some of your peer project managers or product owners will reach out to your resources on your project directly and ask them to do something. That's going a step too far in my book. They should always come through you. If they want to use your resources, they should come through you first of all and not go straight to them. So that's overstepping the mark. So you need to set boundaries around that so they don't do that. Things like asking to test everything. So sometimes business stakeholders will want to test everything there is under the sun, but in the real world, we don't have time to test everything. So you have to set some boundaries there. Things like defect classification. So sometimes a business, if there's a defect, they'll classify it as a critical, we must have this fixed or we can't go live. But in reality, we probably could go live. You could work around that defect. So you have to be firm there and set some boundaries in terms of you can't have everything as a critical, we must have defect. You've got to be pragmatic here and say, right, we could work around these ones and maybe fix them later on down the line as a fast follower. So those are the kind of things that typically come up, but make sure as you're going through the project, if you sense that these stakeholders are going too far, you want to manage their expectations and be firm and push back where appropriate. Okay, the last one, element number 5 of stakeholder management, is maintaining the relationship and building the relationship. So you've established the relationship as element 3, but then you want to maintain it and also build the relationship. And you can do that in several ways, but I think the key ingredients to building a relationship is gaining the stakeholders' trust. The more they trust you, the better the relationship, and the less work that relationship takes in the future because they know you, they trust you. So if you tell them something, they will believe it. They don't have to see all the evidence and the proof. They just trust you and they know you're responsible and you've delivered before. So the ways to do that, quite simple really. Always do what you say you're going to do. If you say you're going to do something to the stakeholder, make sure you do it. Or if you can't do it, make sure you tell them in advance that, I know I said I was going to do this, but it's not going to be possible. So I just wanted to let you know that. And we're going to try and mitigate it by X, Y, Z. Number 2 is always keeping them well informed as well. So if there's any communications, make sure they're part of it and they get those communications as soon as possible. Don't let them hear things secondhand or be the last to know, because that doesn't do good for trust and building that relationship. So make sure you keep them very well informed by whatever means they've chosen to at the start of the project. And the other one is make sure they are involved in all those any kind of key decisions they think they should be involved in. So don't go off and make decisions without them. They should have been part of that. Make sure you keep them involved in the process, be it, requirements gathering or testing or a scope document. Just make sure you keep them involved and you're not doing anything without them if they should be part of that conversation. Okay, that's it. I'm going to quickly recap on the 5 elements of stakeholder management, then I'll call it a day. Element number 1 is identifying the stakeholders. Element number 2 is understanding the stakeholders. What's their stake in the project? How much do they care? What are their politics? Number 3 is forming a relationship with the stakeholders. It's not enough to just communicate with them and identify them. You need to form some kind of relationship with them. Element number 4 is establishing boundaries and maintaining or enforcing boundaries. So you have to manage expectations and push back where required. And then element number 5 is maintaining and building the relationship, building that trust by making sure you do what you say you're going to do, including them in key decisions and key processes and keeping them well informed. Okay, that's a video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this one, hit the subscribe button. And until tomorrow, please take care.